screen.
Greetings. I am Dr. Sarah Ahmed. I'm a medical doctor, currently based in Beirut, where I serve as the Vice President of the Universal Peace Federation in the Middle East. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar of the Middle East Peace Initiative Forum. Before we start the program, I would like to share with you an overview of the series so far. This forum started last year as a series of webinars hosted by the Universal Peace Federation with the theme Toward Peace in the Middle East. We began, as you can see, in January 2021, focusing on the International Summit Council for Peace, ISCP, commenting on the Abraham Accords, with the former Prime Ministers of Canada, Israel, and the Czech Republic. Then the next two webinars were focused on the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace, IAPP. In February, speakers included parliamentarians from the UAE and Italy, with the ambassador of Bahrain, while in April, we had speakers from Israel, Morocco, and the USA. After that, in July, the role of religious leaders in Track 2 peace processes was addressed as we heard from Muslim, Jewish, and Christian religious leaders from across the region. Then in September, the forum turned its attention to the field of health, focusing on how to bring better care to Palestinian as well as Israeli citizens. The following month, business leaders were invited to discuss the potential for economic cooperation between Israel and Palestine, how both parties can benefit, how international partners can help, and how this can be a factor that will help bring peace in the region. And in November, we hear that it is culture and art that move the world. It is affection, not reason, that strikes people in their innermost being. The December webinar marked a new development in this series, as we turned the focus onto the perspective of a particular nation. We wanted to learn about Sudan from one of its sons, in his own words. Our series did not end in 2021, but we continued producing two events. In January this year, innovative economic approaches to the Middle East were discussed with speakers from Israel and Bahrain. And just last month, 3 visionary projects were explored. These were Soccer for Peace, Champions in Life, and Children of Abraham. As you see, we've covered a lot of ground in a year. Today, we hope to complete the first circle with a fresh look at the effect of the Abraham Accords. We will be listening to a fine list of speakers, starting with the Honorable Newt Gingrich, Speaker at the US House of Representatives from 1995 to 1999, His Excellency Dr. Ali Rashid El-Nuaimi, Chair of the Committee on Defense and Foreign Affairs in UAE, the Right Honorable Stephen Harper, Prime Minister of Canada from 2006 till 2015, and His Excellency Ehud Olmert, Prime Minister of Israel from 2006 to 2009. This will be followed by a roundtable of moderated discussion, after which we will hear closing remarks from UPF President Dr. Michael Jenkins. It is my pleasure now to introduce the moderator of today's session, Honorable Hilik Bar. He served as Deputy Speaker of Israel Parliament, the Knesset, from 2013 to 2019, and as a parliamentarian, he founded and chaired the caucus that works on resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Two-State Solution Caucus. He now works as a business consultant for a private company. Welcome, Honorable Hilik Bar. I now pass on to you the virtual floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah Ahmed, for your great introduction and for your kind words. Good morning to our North American panelists and good afternoon to our Middle Eastern speakers. I'm very much delighted and honored to moderate this distinguished panel. And let me begin, please, by sending our joint condolences to the families of the recent terror victims in Israel and wishes for a quick recovery for the wounded people. As you know, just a few days ago, since the successful Negev summit, that brought together a lot of hope to the region, but brought together also the foreign ministers of the US, Bahrain, Morocco, Egypt, and UAE, and Israel to open a new path for peace and cooperation. It is evident that a year and a half after signing the first Abraham Accord, the unity among nations is growing together. This fact sends a very strong message that peace-loving citizens of the Middle East will prevail over conflict, terror, and war. And to begin this discussion, I would like to welcome the Honorable Newt Gingrich, who served as Speaker of the US House of Representatives from 1995 to 1991. Mr. Gingrich, as you know, was the architect of the contract with America that in 1994 captured a Republican majority in the House of Representatives for the first time in 40 years. He's currently a commentator on Fox News and frequently contributes to US and foreign news television programs. Speaker Gingrich has sent us a recorded video message due to personal circumstances. Let us watch the video of Mr. Gingrich, please.
I want to commend everybody who's involved in the Abraham Accord Alliance meeting, because it's a very important step to try to make sure that the Middle East doesn't just slide into a total disaster based on the desperation of the Biden administration wanting to get an agreement with Iran no matter what the cost. And that's why I particularly want to thank Prime Minister Olmert, Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and the former Deputy Speaker of the Knesset, Hilik Bar, for helping put this together. You know, what you have is the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Egypt, and Israel coming together to create an Abraham Accord alliance, because they all recognize that the Iranian dictatorship, with its open statement of desire to dominate, with its leading support for terrorism, with its effort to get both nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles, is really, really dangerous. And that the current administration, unfortunately, is following a policy that empowers and strengthens the Iranian dictatorship, and is even talking about taking away the terror designation, even though in the last few days we've seen examples, for example, of firing missiles into Iraq near an American embassy, an American consulate. We've seen examples of assassins from Iran in the United States trying to kill several people from the Trump administration who were involved in the killing of Soleimani, the general who was the lead terrorist who had organized terror killings all around the world. And his killing was seen by the Iranian dictatorship as something that was so fundamental to their existence that they have a deep, deep need to try to get even. And they're actively trying right now. And of course, their support of the Houthis in Yemen as they engage in terror tactics is one more example that it makes no sense to eliminate the terror designation of the Iranians. In this setting, having these countries come together is an act of great courage, and it's working. It's working both culturally, where the United Arab Emirates are really taking the lead in developing a country that has an open society that allows people to truly state what they believe, that recognizes all the major religions, and that is remarkable. Calista and I visited, and you see a sense of freedom there that is an enormous step in the right direction. It's also clear that both commerce and tourism are growing, and that Morocco, as well as Bahrain and UAE and Israel, all are developing a very healthy tourist relationship. And that's good, because that means people get to know each other. They have a sense of who real people are, not just the caricatures of propaganda and of hatred. So this meeting is important. It's a building block in the right direction, and hopefully it will be one of the things which helps the Middle East get to a better future, despite some really bad decisions about the Iranian dictatorship.
Thank you very much, Speaker Gingrich, and I will go straight to the next guest. Our next speaker is His Excellency Dr. Ali El-Nuaimi. Dr. El-Nuaimi is a member of the UAE Federal National Council for the Emirates of Abu Dhabi and chairman of the Defense Affairs, Interior and Foreign Affairs Committee at the Council. As a pioneer of educational reform and policy in the UAE, Dr. El-Nuaimi served as the Chancellor of the United Arab Emirates University. As a prominent advocate of global peace, tolerance, and coexistence, he has leading international experts on extremism and education. Dr. El-Nuaimi, the floor is yours, please. Please unmute yourself,
Yes,
Dr. El-Nuaimi.
yes.
Thank you.
Well, yes. Good day. First of all, it's an honor for me to participate in such a session with distinguished guests. I know I have to, stick with the 5 minutes, trying to help my friend, former Prime Minister Olmert to finish with 1 hour. I don't want to go over, the Abraham Accord. How did we reach it? But let's be optimistic. Let's focus on the outcome of that agreement. Today, the Minister of Transportation, the Israeli one, in the UAE, and she signed an agreement with our Interior Minister that those who hold the UAE driver license can drive with it in Israel, and the Israeli or any others who hold the Israeli driver license, they can use it in the UAE also. So this is where the real outcome, it's the real engagement of people to people. The impact of this treaty is not, it's not a political, it's not a security, it's not a government to a government. Actually, we are seeing, the engagement with the people. Today is the last day of Expo 2020 in Dubai. We are proud that we had about 300,000 Israeli visit, Expo 2020 in 6 months. So this show you, what's the real outcome of the Abraham Accord by the engagement between people to people. And this is where I want to highlight this. The Abraham Accord agreement is not a political agreement. It's not a security agreement. It's not a security. It's not an agreement, to counter Iran. It's a platform to change the region. It's an agent of it's an agent of change for the whole region. To transform it in a new region where everyone will enjoy security, stability, prosperity, where the Israeli will feel that they are part of this region, that they belong here, their root is here. Today, by the way, the Minister of Economics, the Israeli Minister of Economics, is in Egypt. Last week, an Israeli delegation with an Egyptian delegation were in Jordan, talking about how to finalize the initiatives related to bringing water from Israel to the Jordanian and electricity from Jordan to Israel. These things actually show the real outcome of peace and the engagement that we need to have. We are very optimistic. We feel that, especially the youth in the Arab world, are fed up with extremism, with hate, and they are looking for new hope, and they are eager actually to participate in building the whole region where everyone will feel that there is a role for them and that they are welcome. Of course, we have to understand that in our region, there is enemies of peace and those who will try to undermine what we are doing, but we should have the courage, take the lead, to push the boundary in all sectors to make sure that, peace is the only path for this region. And, when coming to engaging with peace, there is no other option. We have to keep the momentum, keep pushing and engaging everyone, not only those countries who signed the Abraham Accord, but others at the government level, the private sector level, the NGO, even individual, actually. We need to create a new culture in the region that peace is the path that the whole region wants. And this is the only hope for the whole region to enjoy security, stability, and prosperity. And I assure you, we in the UAE, we are going full speed with engagement in all sectors, and in health, education, technology, water, you name them, with our Israeli friend, and trying to bring others in the region on board within these initiatives. And we are very optimistic. There is no way back, regardless how the American administration look at this, or the European. This is our path. This is our decision. We have to fight for it and push for it, and engage all those who love peace, who believe in peace in the world, actually, to work with us to transform this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. El-Nuaimi. And I have to tell you that I just came 4 days ago from a visit in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, another visit, and from a visit to a visit, I see how much the relations are getting stronger and deeper. So thank you so much for your contribution. And now I would like to welcome the Right Honorable Stephen Harper, who served as the Canada 22 Prime Minister from 2006 to 2015. Mr. Harper is a strong advocate for free trade and open markets. Prime Minister Olmert, we can hear you. If you can put on mute until your turn, because we can hear you. Thank you. So I'll say it again. I would like to welcome the Right Honorable Stephen Harper, who served as Canada's 22nd Prime Minister from 2006 to 2015. Mr. Harper is a strong advocate for free trade and open markets, and during his time in office, oversaw historic trade negotiation and expand Canada commercial relationships. Today, Prime Minister Harper is the chairman and CEO of Harper and Associate Consulting and chairman of the International Democrat Union. He's also chairman of the Friends of Israel initiative. Mr. Harper, it's so good to have you here. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker Barr. I'm delighted to be joining with you once again, as also joining with my friends and fellow panelists, distinguished panelists from around the world, and to have this discussion as we revisit the signing of the Abraham Accords. Let me just begin, as always, by thanking once again Dr. Haq Jahan Moon and everyone at the Universal Peace Federation for making webinars like this possible. I said last year that the Abraham Accords were, in my judgment, by far the most positive news that humanity has received during the entire period of the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't think that is an exaggeration by any means, and my view has not changed. In fact, if anything, I believe this even more strongly today. This positive move in the Middle East stands out against what is otherwise a terrible degeneration in the global geopolitical landscape, particularly as we've all become aware since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. As I said last year, I also think particular credit goes to the UAE, to Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed, to Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah, and others, not just for their leading roles in putting the accords together, but really, I think, for their vision in the unique framing of the accords. Framing the accords in the common roots of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. That framing has made them positive symbols of a lot of important things, of unity, of faith, of hope, and of love, rather than as a call for division, terror, violence, and hate that, frankly, we see from other actors in the Middle East, such as Sunni extremist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and of course, the Shia theocracy in Iran. Credit, of course, should be shared by all parties, including in Israel, I think both the Netanyahu government and the current government of Israel, which has sustained and built on the accords, as well as obviously in the United States, as well as the Trump administration, which played a key role. And I think some credit does go to the Biden administration, which has supported the accords. Now, in fairness, and echoing a little bit what Speaker Gingrich said, I think, to be frank, the current U.S. administration deserves only qualified credit, both for a couple of reasons. First, because of its reluctance to call the Accords by their name. And second, and I think not unrelated, is the desire of the administration to normalize relations with Tehran at what seems like virtually any cost. Now, in any case, what are the positive impacts that the Accords have had? I believe they are several. First, we've seen increased and open political security and cooperation among the countries. Just this in the past week, the signatories, along with Egypt, held the Negev summit in Israel for just this purpose, historic first summit of its kind. We've also witnessed tremendous increases in trade and investment between these countries. Now, frankly, I don't have any statistics at my fingertips, but I have been in Israel and the Gulf and throughout the region several times in the past year. And it is just evident, if you go firsthand, that there is a quantum increase in trade and investment between the countries. There have also been increased tourists. We mentioned Dubai 2022 was mentioned by Dr. El-Nuaimi. We've seen increased tourist, cultural, and sports contacts. In other words, we're seeing the emergence of the people-to-people ties for which the maintenance and growth of these relationships are so important. Finally, let me just mention a couple of knock-on effects. First, I have seen in my travels how the Accords have further strengthened the ties of Israel in much of the Arab world, including in several countries that have not yet officially endorsed the Accords. In other words, the reshaping of the region that Dr. Nuaimi talked about that the Accords have in mind, that is a very real thing that is happening. Now, the other knock-on effect is yet to happen, and that's in terms of the promotion of peace between Israelis and Palestinians. I still believe that you're going to see that in time. It hasn't happened yet. But I think the Accords, as I said before, by demonstrating the increasing refusal of Arab countries to endorse Palestinian intransigence as a bargaining tactic, I think that these will inevitably and eventually lead to their return to the table and to real negotiations. And as I said before, I think once the Palestinians return to the table, they will find that the signatories to the Accords will be helpful players in getting a deal that's ultimately good for everyone. So, look, to conclude, I believe the Accords have been an unqualified success in a very difficult time in the world, a success that has been solidified in numerous ways, and a success that I anticipate will continue to grow in the years ahead, in particular, when we get full Western buy-in, because I think that's one thing that is still lacking. So to sum up, as I say, the Accords have been a success for reasons that are political, economic, cultural, and religious, especially, as I've said before, because they frame the different faiths of the region as having common roots, and they seek reconciliation between them, just as all great faiths seek reconciliation between God and humanity. So thanks, Speaker Barr and everybody at the UPF for inviting me once again.
Thank you so much, Right Honorable Harper. And our last speaker before we open the panel to questions and answers will be His Excellency Ehud Olmert. Mr. Olmert served as the Prime Minister of the State of Israel from 2006 to 2009. He worked towards peace very strongly, toward the peace agreement with the Palestinians. And in November 2007, he attended the Annapolis Peace Conference led by President George W. Bush. Mr. Olmert continued to promote efforts of peace also today and to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He's currently heads a private consulting practice. Welcome, Prime Minister Olmert. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hilik. I'm delighted to be part of this gathering. In fact, I'm very happy that the moderator is no other than the former Deputy Speaker of our Parliament and prominent member of the Labour Party. which is now part of the Israeli coalition government. I think that what we have witnessed this week in the desert, the conference of Morocco, Bahrain, the Emirates, and Egypt, together with Israel and the Americans, was an historic event, not so much for the content, which I don't think that we all know what it was specifically, but the very fact that all of these countries gathered together in a very friendly and respectful way is a signal that something dramatically has changed in the Middle East as a result of the Abraham Accords. There is no question about it. I visited Morocco years before there was a formal agreement, but we had very friendly relations with Morocco. And the fact is that there are hundreds of thousands of Israelis who were born in Morocco, and they are now part and a very important part of the Israeli society. And of course, we have an agreement with Egypt for more than 40 years, a peace agreement with Egypt. And I was privileged to cooperate with Egypt, visit in Cairo and Sharm el-Sheikh, and I was a guest of President Mubarak several times, the late president of Egypt. And but the addition this time of Bahrain, and of course primarily of the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is extraordinary. I join in with what Prime Minister Harper said before about the importance, the enormous contribution of Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed to the agreement. Of course, we have to thank the Trump administration, the former government of Israel, of Netanyahu, for creating this framework. But the leader, the one that inspired it, and the one that took the bold initiative in creating this, and I heard it from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed and from the other prominent leaders of the Arab Emirates. It was first and foremost their decision. And they showed leadership, and they showed determination, and they showed firmness. And I can only say that I personally admire their courage. I've been there quite a few times in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai. I met people from Bahrain, and there is no any background of hostilities between us and these countries, and therefore it was so easier and smoother to get together. It took us a lot more to create this kind of friendship with the Egyptians, because we fought against each other, or the Jordanian, we fought against them. But now, thank God, we have these good relations with Egypt as well. And I think that we have to mention Jordan and the Honorable, His Royal King Abdallah II, for the leadership, for his friendship, for his total commitment to the good relations between us and them, which is very important. Of course, all of these countries are also united in the opposition to the radical attitudes and the fundamentalist Islamic extremism of the current leadership in Iran. We have to do everything possible in order to stop the Iranians from continuing their nuclear program. I hope that President Biden is doing everything in his power to make sure that the agreement that is scheduled to be signed will be responsible and will meet all the challenges that we may face with regard to the Iranian nuclear program. So I don't want to think that at this stage we can criticize President Biden, because we don't know the details. I know one thing though, and I wanted to make it very clear. I know President Biden for maybe 40 years. We have spent many, on different occasions, many hours together, and we talked. And one thing I'm certain about, and this is that he's a great friend of the state of Israel, and he will not ignore the important security needs of the state of Israel at any time in the future. And I think that part of this conference in the desert was to guarantee all of these countries that were part of this, that America is their friend and that it is committed to the future and to the security. And I trust that when Secretary Blinken says it and President Biden says it, then we can accept it and make sure that they will stand by their commitments. The main thing that still remains to be seen is the future negotiations between us and the Palestinians. I'm not so certain that we can put the blame for the lack of this process on one side. I think that both sides should do a lot more to move forward and establish the necessary foundations for negotiations. You know, I don't want to go into the history of what I did and how I tried to make this agreement, but I think that at this time, considering all the other developments in the region, considering the fact that there is the Abraham Accord peace between Israel and the Emirates and Bahrain, and the peace agreement between Israel and Morocco, and serious diplomatic contacts between Israel and Sudan, and the much growing and expanding cooperation between us and Egypt, and between us and Jordan. The president of Israel visited yesterday Jordan and was received with the highest honors, which really made all of us very happy. That the Palestinians must be on top of the agenda, and that both sides, I don't want to blame anyone, I don't want to criticize anyone, I'm not in the blame game because it's really irrelevant. We need to work together to move forward rapidly, seriously, and responsibly in order to create a kind of understanding which is a preliminary requirement for furthering the negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians towards a full peace treaty. And again, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this very distinguished gathering of international leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Olmert. And we will have more questions for you about the Palestinian issue. It's not over. But let's bring now all of our panelists back into this virtual stage. Right Honorable Harper, Prime Minister Olmert, His Excellency Dr. El-Nuaimi. We gathered some excellent questions that our staff got from the viewers. And I would like to start with Dr. El-Nuaimi to respond to the first question. The UAE has shown a great leadership for peace and tolerance in the Middle East. What is, to your idea, the next step we should take?
Well, I think the next step that no one should be left behind in the region. We should, try to promote these initiatives and engage, all those who believe in peace with us. And this is where I mentioned, we have to push for others to join us. The government, the private sector, the NGO, even individual. And actually what I see, since the signing of the Abraham Accord in the UAE, that the UAE became a platform where we saw that a real engagement between many Israelis, businessmen, officials, NGO, and people with others from the region, from Saudi Arabia, from Oman, from Qatar, from Kuwait, from India, from Pakistan, and from other nationalities. I think it's very important, to push the boundary. We are proud of this achievement that we have today, but this is not enough. We have to keep, keep the momentum, keep pushing, because at the end, it's very important to understand this. Peace, you have to fight for it. Prime Minister Olmert mentioned about the UAE, how he saw the UAE. We invested a lot in the last 30 years to prepare the UAE people for such initiatives by promoting coexistence, by countering hate, by countering incitement, changing our curriculum, changing the religious narratives. So when our leadership took that decision, the people of the UAE were ready and they were on board. And this is where I think it's very important to focus on the curriculum that are taught in the region to make sure that it's promote coexistence, it's counter hate, they have to stop the incitement, and also to watch the religious narratives. We have to prepare the people, not only the government, the people for a peace initiative, for a peace treaty in the region. We have to pave the way that whenever their government, their politicians sign an agreement, the people should be ready, to be on board, to engage in a real people-to-people peace. And this is very crucial. And I see, frankly, that there is, our American friend, they have a role to play in it. I wish that the Biden administration look at the region through the Abraham Accord. I am sure if many governments in the region saw that the Abraham Accord is a priority number one for the Biden administration in the region, they will join. So I think we need their help, and we need also the European help to engage with the Palestinian, not only with the leadership, but also to prepare the Palestinian through the UNRWA, reforming the curriculum over there, trying to focus on those imams, what kind of religious narrative in the mosque, encouraging, promoting coexistence and countering extremism and incitement.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this answer, Dr. El-Nuaimi. And the following question is for Prime Minister Olmert. Prime Minister Olmert, how should the Abraham Accords stakeholders relate with the Iranian ambitions?
Well, of course, all the partners to the Abraham Accords are not happy with the Iranian plans. That's clear and obvious, and has been stated and spelled out in the most explicit terms by the Emirates as well as by the others, and of course Israel as well. So I think that we talk about it, we exchange views, and we try to coordinate for any eventuality in a very careful manner. I think, based on my acquaintance with the general mood in the Emirates, as well as in the other countries, that the benefit of this cooperation is that the details of which are not becoming public, and that I felt that when I visited the Emirates, and I did it maybe 8 times in the last year, that the leadership there is absolutely opposed to the Iranian potential plans. They are absolutely opposed to the rhetoric of the Iranians' leadership, but they are not trying to compete with the Iranians in making statements of a provocative nature, because I don't think they need it. They feel strong enough, they feel supported enough, and they will continue to deal with it in this matter. But they are, as I said, I think they are absolutely against the attitude of the Iranians, and they share with us the concerns, and together with the Egyptians and the others, and all the participants of the Abraham Accords. And we will continue to do what is necessary to convey the joint attitudes to the international community, and first and foremost to the Americans. And I think we did it together in the conference early this week in the desert, and will continue to do it in the future. And I think that this is the way in which we have to deal with it. To do things, to cooperate, to make sure that we are all protected and defended and secured, and not to compete with each other or with anyone else in the extreme rhetoric and statements which do not make any significant contribution to lower the volume and intensity of the disagreements which characterize the relations between these countries and the Iranians.
Thank you, Prime Minister Olmert, for this elaborating answer. The next question is for Right Honorable Harper. Prime Minister Harper, what would be, to your idea, your recommendations from the economic perspective to enhance the Abraham Accords?
Well, look, I don't know how much I would really have to add to that, Speaker Barr. What I have witnessed firsthand has been both governments and the private sector engaging across Israel and these countries very deeply. Every time I go now to the UAE, Bahrain, these countries, are literally, you literally don't have to walk very far to find Israeli business delegations having meetings with their counterparts in the Gulf region. So, I think that is really flourishing at a very rapid rate. I think one thing people sometimes don't appreciate that's a little bit different from the Gulf countries, say from Israel, is that, in the Gulf countries, the message of business interaction and cooperation in many ways really has to come from the government first, because, it is the big economic actor and the private sector often follows what it sees the government's doing. But governments have been sending those signals that they want to see cross-border cooperation and investment. And I say, I don't have any statistics, but in my estimation, certainly what I've seen in the past year, both in terms of Arab business representatives coming to Israel and vice versa, this is really flourishing. So I don't yet see a bottleneck or a problem. Maybe Speaker Barr, if I could just revert a little bit to another question, like the broader question, what if anything is kind of holding up progress of the Accords, or the kind of progress that the Accords envisages? I would just say there is one thing that I find troubling, and that is in the West, and to some degree in the Arab world, is the continuing inaccurate and fairly pejorative depictions of life and of relations that comes from media, from Western liberal media, and also obviously from the Al Jazeeras of the world in the region. And I think that because of this, this coverage, which just fails to represent the kinds of, not just the Abraham Accords, but the positive change sweeping across the world, and the nexus you have between the Al Jazeera and the Western media, I just think that negative images are conveyed that are just simply not true and do not reflect and do not inform people about the positive developments happening. If I could drill down a little bit more of a specific example. We all know, all of us who have been to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, the UAE, what a progressive country it is and how long it has been a progressive country. As Dr. El-Nuaimi said, it has been educating its citizens towards tolerance and progress for decades. You now see the same thing happening at an unprecedented rate in Saudi Arabia. But, frankly, if you're to open American, Canadian, Western media channels or papers, you will see these countries lumped in with the Irans and the Venezuelas when we talk about energy security. So, look, I think that's the big challenge. How do we make sure that the reality on the ground is being conveyed to people outside the region who do not see it firsthand?
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Harper. And the next question is for Dr. El-Nuaimi. Dr. El-Nuaimi, what are the impediments to the Abraham Accords that you are concerned about?
Well, you see, I am a very optimistic person. And, I believe that always, we have to take the lead. We have to create, new initiatives. We have to push the boundary. But, I'll give you some example. Sometimes politicians, they don't look at the big picture when looking at the region and using the Abraham Accord. Last week there was, these terrorist attacks in Israel. I feel it's not, I did contact some Israeli friends, officials. I told them, look, I am here to pay my condolences, but what I want is this: let's engage in developing a strategy to counter the root of these terrorists, to counter the narrative that they are promoting. Sometimes some politicians, they try, to use certain incidents, to serve their political agenda, but sometimes that hurts the Abraham Accord. Yesterday, unfortunately, what happened in Israel was labeled as, the Arabic terrorists. Terrorism has no religion. Terrorism has no ethnic. Terrorism has no nationality. We want to bring people together. We want to build bridges between the people, bridges of trust, respect, love, working together, acceptance. And you see, when we frame such incidents in a way related to, a religion or related to an ethnic or nationality, that does not help. Actually, that undermine, what we are trying to achieve to promote peace. So I urge all politicians, the Israeli, the Arabs, the American, the European, always whenever they talk about the region, talk to the people, they should understand we are in a different era now. People in the social media, they watch everything, they comment everything on everything. They engage in a discussion about whatever you say. And whatever you say, it's in every house. It's not TV as it used to be before. So it's very important to understand the impact of what you do or what you say. So this is why, we what happened last week, it was the first time that ISIS carried some of these attacks. Jihad Islami carried these attacks. Of course, Jihad Islami carried because they got instruction from Tehran. But we have to engage together, to counter them, not only to counter that as terrorist incidents, but to go to the root and try to work hard to develop a plan, a strategy to make sure that won't happen again. And we need a narrative that will gain the heart and the mind of the Arabs, to engage them that they are part of the peace process, that they themselves will be an agent of change, that they themselves will counter any incitement or hate against Jews or against Israel.
We don't
hear
hear
you.
you.
Okay. So what I said, the next question is to hear it actually from the Israeli perspective, and it will be to Prime Minister Olmert. Prime Minister Olmert, can the recent escalation in terror attacks, to your idea, threaten the stability of the new alliances formed in the Middle East?
No, the answer is simply no. This recent terrorist probably initiated or inspired by Daesh and by ISIS and by the Iranians is something that is definitely needs to be treated with a iron fist, and it will be treated with iron fist. I can promise you this. But that is a reminder of what Iran and its collaborators can do. They were trying to do it to the Saudis. They were trying to do it to the Emirates. in different formats or with different groups, but more or less aiming at the same thing, to try and shake the stability within those countries. Now, I don't think that there is one person in the entire world which has the same experience that unfortunately I do have as the former mayor of Jerusalem for 10 years in the most dramatic and painful years in the modern history of Jerusalem, when the second Intifada took place, and almost every day we had terrorist suicidal attacks in the middle of town, in buses, in restaurants, in shops, and we lost hundreds of people. And I took part in every single funeral, and I eulogized every single victim. And thousands of people were wounded, and tens of thousands of people in Jerusalem went through traumas that were very hard to recover from, and some of them didn't. So I know what it does to the life of people, and I can promise you that nothing, we've been through much more difficult times. We are much more capable at this time of handling terror. And I promise you that we will reach out for the sources, for the leaders, and we will not hesitate to take good care of them in order to stop it. But I know from a personal acquaintance, but I also know because, as I said, I've been there in the Emirates and in Morocco, and in Egypt and in Jordan, and I'm familiar with the Bahrain leaders. None of them will surrender to the threats, to the violence, to the terror of these murderers. And if there will be any impact, it will be a positive impact in strengthening the cooperation amongst our countries and strengthen the collaboration that we have already in opposing these terrorist actions.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister Olmert. I have to tell you that we are all very encouraged by this view, and we will hold you to this promise, as I hope will be fulfilled. Right Honorable Harper, the next question is to you. Are there, in your eyes, any other factors like interfaith or people-to-people initiatives that can contribute to the development of peace in the Middle East?
I think I made some reference to this, Speaker Barr, in my earlier comments, and I just reiterate what I said. I always said this when I was in government. You can sign political agreements with other governments. You can sign trade agreements with other governments. You can sign cooperation agreements of various forms with other governments. But really what solidifies these agreements over time is to the extent they begin to develop a web of people-to-people contacts. As I've talked about, the normalization of relations between the Gulf countries and Israel leading to the exchange of business delegations. We saw coming out, we've seen some important things happening. We've seen coming out of the Abraham Accords, we've seen increased sports contacts between some of these countries facing each other in various athletic competitions that just didn't happen before. The Dubai Expo was mentioned, and the unprecedented, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Israelis that visited. I myself, I was at the Dubai Expo and visited the Israeli pavilion, which was, not just being visited by Israelis, but by people from the UAE and all the Arab countries and other countries that were visiting. These are the things that really will solidify the accords over time, this growing network of people-to-people ties. I think anything we can do to further that, whether it's art, whether it's sport, whether it's tourism, is a good thing. And it's as people come to know each other, they don't always necessarily love each other, but they come to understand that very negative stereotypes are almost always inaccurate propaganda. And these are countries that are, culturally actually have close roots. They're geographically not really that far apart. So I just think with the development of people-to-people ties, you'll see these relationships solidified. And by the way, I think you just saw that, if you don't mind me saying, Hilik, and what happened just with these terrible attacks in Israel. And obviously my condolences to everybody in Israel who has lost loved ones. But you have seen unprecedented solidarity with Israel and unprecedented criticism of terrorism from the Arab world as a consequence. And that's what the Accords and that's what the people-to-people ties that they are developing are doing. So look, I'm not sure I have any additional ideas to mention. I just say that these things are happening, and the more fronts they can happen on, and the more people can interact with each other on in multiple different ways, the better it will be for the Accords and for the region in the long term.
Thank you, Prime Minister Harper. And talking about this subject, I think that it's exactly the time to thank, on behalf of all of us, to the huge efforts of the UPF on creating and establishing all these people-to-people and interface activities that promote peace in the Middle East, and not only in the Middle East. So we thank all of us to the UPF for their efforts. Gentlemen, I need to wrap up this portion to give each of you, 2 minutes to offer your final thoughts on the discussion. And we will begin with Prime Minister Olmert. Prime Minister Olmert, the floor is yours. 2 minutes to summarize your thoughts, please.
Thank you very much, Hilik, for giving me the opportunity. I want to thank all the participants for their thoughts and their inspiration, which is very encouraging. I think that while we have witnessed a very vicious invasion of the Ukraine by the Russians in the last month, while we have to deal with terror by terrorist organizations in the heart of Israel in the last couple of weeks. At the same time, I think we can see that there is a trend which is manifested in the most inspiring manner by the countries that were involved in the Abraham Accord and in the gathering in the desert last week, that there is a chance for something else, for a different narrative, which is based on tolerance, on understanding, on a determination to oppose the radical, extreme terrorist attitude, and to unite forces for the cause of peace. So I'm proud of this process. I think we all need to encourage it. And I think that UPF is doing a great job in spreading these ideas to the international community. And I'm very, very happy to be part of it.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Olmert. Thank you for your thoughts and your very important insight to this discussion and your contribution. And now we will hear from Right Honorable Stephen Harper, please.
Yeah, thanks again to the UPF for having me. As I said earlier, I can't be positive enough about the Accords and the changes that they are bringing about throughout the region. Political, security, economic, cultural, religious. This is a positive development of really unparalleled dimensions in my lifetime, and we should all be behind it. There is some unfinished work. Obviously, the unfinished work is to encourage dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, and ultimately a two-state solution to the particular dilemma that's presented. I can certainly assure you that all of us who are friends of the Accords will encourage our Palestinian friends to return, to go to the bargaining table. And should they go to the bargaining table, I can certainly assure you, those of us at the who are friends of Israel, the group I chair, those of us will certainly encourage our Israeli friends to come to an honorable settlement of the issues. Just as those of us who are friends of Israel and friends of our Arab neighbors will encourage and continue to speak out about the attempts of the Biden administration and others to in any way normalize the government of Iran. It is important to all of us, just as we support the Abraham Accords and everything they stand for, it is important that we oppose the government of Iran and everything that it represents and everything that it stands for, because it is the opposite of what the region and the world needs. But once again, my congratulations to Israelis, Emiratis, and to everybody else who's made this wonderful development possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prime Minister Harper, for your very important contribution. And let's hope that you, together with us, will continue to fight for peace. With each one of our Prime Minister said, it's the most worthy war is the war for peace. And now we will hear the concluding remarks from His Excellency, Dr. El-Nuaimi. Please, Dr. El-Nuaimi.
Well, first, I'd like to, again, thank the UPF for their, their role actually in promoting peace regionally and globally, and for organizing such outstanding webinar. I want just to comment about, what the Abraham Accord meant to myself, to the UAE, the government, and the people, and how to move forward. During the last Gaza war, people, they asked, what will happen to the Abraham Accord? Yesterday, after this terrorist attack in Israel, people, they asked the same thing. Well, what I want to say is this: there is no way back. The Abraham Accord is there to stay. It is there to last. We see it as the future. The Abraham Accord is the future, not only for the relation between the UAE and Israel. We see the Abraham Accord as a future for the whole region. For regardless what happened, regardless of the challenges that we will face, we will be promoting, fighting, for the Abraham Accord. And whatever challenges that we will face on our way, those challenges will bring us together more. They won't divide us. They will not make us sit back, but actually they will fuel our activity to engage more in making the Abraham Accord, a platform for the whole region and a gateway for all those who believe in peace.
God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you, and thank you so much, His Excellency Dr. El-Nuaimi. And we trust you to keep our interest for peace in the UAE. Just before we leave, 1 minute, this concludes our discussion of the Abraham Accords for now. I want to thank all of you for sharing with us your invaluable thoughts and recommendations. And it was a great pleasure hosting you and being with you and learn from you. But just a minute before we leave, I would like to invite our dear friend, Dr. Michael Jenkins, the president of the UPF International, to offer some closing remarks. Dr. Jenkins, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Our Excellencies, Mr. Hilik Bar, Deputy Speaker, and to Sarah Ahmed. Dr. Ahmed, you have done a masterful job as our MC, as well as being a person from Sudan and a person leading the way for peace from Sudan. We are very grateful to have your leadership. I want to give special thanks to our founder, Dr. Moon, and also our chairman of UPF, Dr. Thomas Walsh. And the organizing committee did a lot that they should be commended for this. Dr. Taj Hamad, also Mr. Had Ben-Zvi, David Fraser Harris, and also Dr. Famularo from Canada, as well as Jacques Marion and Mark Ran in Europe. A tremendous effort to bring this together. We're very grateful that the Trump administration saw the vision forward to go and work with Israel, Bahrain, and UAE. And also I'm happy to see the Biden administration is supporting this now. And I want to thank His Excellency, Dr. Ali Al-Nuaimi. We are so grateful for your leadership with the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace, as well as your advice and guidance for our work to bring the dialogue throughout the Middle East and also throughout Europe and also throughout the Western world and then on to Asia. You've been a tremendous help and support in bringing allies together. Also, His Excellency Prime Minister Olmert, we are so grateful you could come to the World Summit in Korea. Your remarks there will never be forgotten. Everyone wants peace, but what are we willing to do for it? And what I want to say today is UAE, Bahrain, Israel, we're very, very proud of your courage to see this through. As Dr. Al-Nuaimi said, there's no way back. And our dear friend and leader, the Right Honorable Stephen Harper, your wisdom and experience, having traveled countless times to Bahrain and UAE and bringing partnerships and friendships through your International Association of Heads of State. We're very, very inspired by your leadership and your editorials in the Wall Street Journal. It helps us understand we can come together and we can build a way for peace. We really especially want to thank Bahrain and the UAE for not turning back, even when there was challenges. And we see now there's a exchange of tourism, travel, and all kinds of economic development. They say it will develop into a $1 trillion corridor of trade, will benefit the whole world. I want to thank my special friend, Speaker Newt Gingrich, who is really a very close advisor of the Washington Times and the UPF. And I just can't say enough about our panel today. This program now will be played again throughout our UPF affiliates in 157 countries. And it will really encourage the world to know that even with all the challenges, even in the face of terrorism, these great leaders and the peoples they represent are courageously not turning back. So I want to thank you all. Thank you for this wonderful program, and may God bless you.